Hi, I'm Vic. I'm one of the founders of Upplaud. I've been hosting my own podcast on and off for many, many years and been presenting to plenty of CPA societies and bar associations and other professional associations. And it's really frustrating when I put in so much time and effort and I don't get enough client referrals or clients out of the presentation or the podcast that I'm either hosting or being a guest on. And that's not the only reason why I do those presentations. I like educating. I like sharing these kinds of insights through my own blogs and video blogs. And I'm sure there's a part of you that also enjoys educating and being a resource to others. But at the end of the day, to not get enough referrals or business out of it, it makes us question, is it really worth it? Why are we putting in so much time and effort into all the logistics of having our own podcast or being a guest on other people's shows or all these presentations? We have to be able to justify it with an ROI, with a return on our investment of time, let alone some hard costs involved. And it's because of all that frustration that I have and that I see with the clients that we have that I said, look, there has to be a better way. And after working with hundreds and hundreds of attorneys and accountants and consultants and financial advisors who have their own video blog and podcasts and do their own presentations, I've discovered that some of them are able to make it work. A lot of them are able to pull in clients from the format of their podcasts and blogs and presentations. And unfortunately, a lot aren't able to. And I discovered that there's a pattern, that there's at least these three referral maximizers that those kinds of podcasts and presentations have in common. And I hope you have at least a few of these maximizers and you're able to maybe make use of all three of the referral maximizers to make sure that your podcasts and presentations are paying off, that they are pulling in more clients for you, and that your reach is also increased so that you are able to educate more and help more and make a greater impact on other people through your expertise, but also because you're doing all the right things to maximize the referrals through your podcast and presentations. The first referral maximizer that I discovered that all these successful podcasts and presentations have in common is what I call the co-Q. The co-Q is a co-quotient, and what do I mean by that? So in Upplaud, we have some lingo that we use. Upplaud can be used in a variety of scenarios, about 7 or 8 main scenarios where it's you and someone else. That someone else is your co. That co is, your interlocutor is a very fancy word. Bonus points if you know that word. Extra bonus points if you know how to spell interlocutor. But when we were creating the software, I said, look, the word interlocutor, not a lot of people know how to spell it, let alone what it means. It's a little clunky. But a lot of us, we have a co in our world of speaking and publishing podcasts. So that co could be your co-host, of course. It could be your contact, your colleague. It could be your podcast guest. It could be, you can use Upplaud where you're the guest on somebody else's podcast where they're the host. And so in that sense, maybe you're the co, but in Upplaud parlance, you're the member of Upplaud and they are always the co. Your co could be, in addition to your co-host or podcast guest, or the person who's hosting you, could be an association if you're doing a presentation for a bar association, CLE, or a CPA society, or a networking group, or a Facebook group. That administrator or director or host is your co. The co could be the moderator of a panel that you're serving on. It could be your co-panelist. So you and another panelist can create an Upplaud together. So there are a variety that you can kind of look on the website and kind of understand other tutorials of what the co is. And what I discovered is that uh, one of the simplest ways of producing referrals and clients out of your podcast and presentations is not only promoting it to your circle of influence, but pulling from your co's circle of influence as well. But, we have to somehow prioritize who has more influence than others. And, very often we are prioritizing someone who has a big list, a big database, Rolodex, LinkedIn connections. And yes, quantity is important, But sometimes, and I would say more often, it's the quality of those relationships that are even more important. Someone could be connected to thousands of people on LinkedIn. What does that really mean? They maybe barely met that person at a networking event once, or maybe at a conference, and they barely know that person's name. And so, is that really a connection? Is that really a colleague of theirs? It's a contact, so that's better than nothing. And so, if someone has 5,000 connections on LinkedIn, are they more influential with your target market and segment, your ideal client, than someone who only has 300 connections on LinkedIn? That's hard to tell, right? Because that person with 300 connections may have curated his LinkedIn and may have treated his or her connections that much more dearly. And so he's got or she's got a greater influence, quality of relationship with those 300 people, or maybe 200 of those 300, versus someone with, let's say, 5,000 that seems impressive by quantity, but by quality of influence or relationship, it just isn't there. And so the co-Q, the co-quotient, is not only quantity, but it's kind of divided by the quality of the relationship that your guests would have, that your co would have. And so that's sometimes hard to decipher in terms of what kind of quality relationships they have, because honestly, their relationships may be quality for someone else, maybe not for you. So are they really connected to your target market and ICP and all those kinds of phrases, who you're looking to work with? So that quality over quantity becomes extremely important. Now, when we work with clients, we're very often looking at that in terms of prioritizing, not only in terms of quantity and quality, but who should your guests, if you're hosting your own podcast, who should they be? In fact, we have a guest brainstormer that might be useful for you. So if you're wondering, maybe I'm not getting as many shares from my podcast guests, or I'm not getting as many right fit with the podcast that I'm on, maybe you're not the right fit for them, but you can introduce someone else to that podcast host. If you'd like, I'm happy to send you our guest brainstormer. Just, I'm sure there's a button around this a video that you can essentially request. I'm happy to share that freebie with you, because we have it for our clients. It's relatively simple for me to forward the guest brainstormer with you. And from there, you can start prioritizing who the right guests for your podcast can be according to that brainstormer and profiler, and then prioritize based on not really the quantity that they have, but the quality of their connections. And how do we decipher the quality of those relationships? I'm going to talk about that in the third referral maximizer. So you could also email me, help@upplaud.com. It's upplaud.com, and feel free to request a guest brainstormer. The second acronym, or referral maximizer, I'm sure you're familiar with. I'm sure you've seen CTA before if you've done any kind of marketing, right? It's called the call to action, and that your podcast and presentation should, of course, dress up your audience, those people who are watching and listening, but they're all dressed up and nowhere to go if you don't have a call to action of what should they do next. Is there a resource you can provide them? Maybe the call to action is for them to buy your product, your service, maybe your lead magnet or whatever, in terms of a low ticket offer. Maybe there is an e-commerce element to your podcast or presentation, but there might be some other resource that you could provide for them. Unless they know what to do next, it's very often very confusing for people. They don't really, it was nice information, maybe entertaining, maybe inspiring, but they don't know what to do next. And so within the context of your podcast and presentation, maybe at the beginning, maybe peppered in the middle, maybe at the end, you should have that call to action that leads people to a landing page on your website that's dedicated to that resource, that can at the very least capture their email address for future follow-up, and provides them what my business partner calls an ethical bribe. It provides them some type of a resource or a call to action. If you're not really sure what kind of a incentive or call to action you could provide your viewers and listeners, your audience, for your podcast or presentation, shoot me an email, help@upplaud.com, and I'll kind of give you a couple of resources. At the very least, part of our brainstorming tool set is what we call our blog brainstormer. And within our blog brainstormer, it's not only handy to come up with topics for blogs, presentations, podcasts, but also part of that are kind of almost 100 templates to come up with titles. And those titles will also give you a clue of what your lead magnets or your call to action magnets can be. So shoot me an email. I'm happy to share that with you along with the guest brainstormer if that would be helpful for you. And then the third referral maximizer has an acronym of PEP, PEP. What do I mean by that? I remember, a couple of years ago, one of our clients wanted to do some of the social media postings. We're a content marketing firm for law firms and accounting firms and financial professionals and consultants. And so one or two of our clients wanted to do some pre-episode postings about what is coming up in terms of their next podcast episode. And I was like, yeah, of course we could put together a post about the upcoming podcast. And okay, it's better than not posting and not announcing the next episode. But just announcing and kind of talking at your connections on social media didn't seem good enough for me. I know just from a marketing perspective that it's a lot more engaging to do what, right? To ask questions and to ask for input and feedback. And I wanted to figure out, is there a way that we can make those pre-episode postings more engaging, more of a pulling effect, so that we can really benefit not only those of us who are doing podcasts and presentations, but also benefit the audience so that our presentations and podcasts are more interesting for them and enables them to get what they want out of our podcast and presentation. And maybe it'll inspire them. The more they give feedback, it's tailored to them. They'll be that much more excited to share our podcast and presentation with their circle of influence. We're all used to sharing our podcast and presentation after we record it. We share it on our social media and email blasts, etc. But if you think about it, the average podcast host tends to book their guests 8 to 10 weeks in advance of the actual recording. For example, I'm recording this video right now in October. I've got guests lined up already for December and January. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Now, sometimes you have those last minute guests or last minute appearances on somebody else's podcast, but typically it's like 8 to 10 weeks in advance. Well, that 8 to 10 weeks is what I call PET, pre-episode time. How can we turn your PET into PEP, a pre-episode posting? And what kind of posting should we do, not only just to announce the upcoming podcast that's happening 8 to 10 weeks from now, but is there an opportunity to pull interest, audience input to make our podcast and presentations even better for our audience, for them? And of course, that in effect makes it even more interesting and better for us because we know people are interested in what we're talking about. And so why guess? Why grope in the dark hoping that they'll be interested in what we have to say? Why don't we put out an Upplaud poll? And so more than a pre-episode posting, it becomes a pre-episode poll to ask our connections what they would find more interesting. And I see that already, that even before I kind of created the automation aspect of Upplaud, where we're able to use AI effectively and we're able to respect the privacy and security of our where your is able to connect their LinkedIn and email into Upplaud in a separate and secure fashion. Even before then, I see that, asking questions is an excellent way to include the audience and create engagement. And I basically said, all right, I've got these 3 referral maximizers here. How can I create some software to make it simple and effective to know that, all right, we can see that our is influential in this specific segment. So why don't we put out a topics poll that's very interesting to that type of audience and pull people from their circle of influence and pull people from my circle of influence that benefit my to make sure that the call to action is extremely relevant. And so the three referral maximizers are able to kind of fit together. And so if you're interested in really seeing PEP come into action, I'm happy to send you a demo of how Upplaud can really take pre-episode postings and turn it into a pre-episode pull for your benefit, your co's benefit, and of course a win-win-win back to your audience. And so hopefully this is kind of the insight of what's the aha. Now, you may have some idea of who your guest should be, but that referral maximizer may need to be optimized a little bit more effectively. Shoot me an email. I'm happy to share resources around there. The second aspect is the call to action. I'm sure you know that you ought to have some type of a call to action before, during, and after the recording. But you might be wondering, what is the right call to action for that audience? Well, built into Upplaud, of course, is asking your audience, asking your co-circle of influence which topic they find more interesting. And if you put together a checklist, a resource around that topic, would they be interested? Is that something helpful for them or someone they know? Or were they just voting to be nice? And if they were nice, maybe they'll be extra nice and share your Upplaud Topics poll to their thousands of connections, thus restarting the pull life cycle. The flywheel of an Upplaud poll can take a life of its own and pull more and more people into your world, into your podcast and presentation. So I hope this helps. Again, my name is Vikram Rajan. I'm one of the founders of Upplaud, and feel free to shoot me an email at help@upplaud.com and get some of those freebies that I mentioned. I'll see you on the other side. Thanks. Let's pull together.